About 2 years back, I was standing in my living room surrounded by 3 shopping bags from Target. A scented candle I definitely didn't need. A decorative pillow to replace a perfectly good decorative pillow. And a kitchen gadget still sealed in plastic, sitting right next to a different kitchen gadget I bought 6 months ago and never once touched. I opened my credit card app that evening. $3,900 in charges for the month. Then I checked my savings account. $840. I was making $63,000 a year. I had been earning above $50,000 for the past 6 years straight. And I had almost nothing to show for it. Not a real emergency fund. Not a retirement account worth mentioning. Not a single month where I felt genuinely ahead. That same week, I stumbled onto an article about a Japanese budgeting method that had been around for over 100 years. And buried inside that article was a detail that stopped me cold. The researcher writing the piece mentioned that many of the Japanese households she'd studied had been practicing the same financial habits for 3 and 4 generations. Grandmothers teaching mothers. Mothers teaching daughters. Quiet wealth being built decade after decade, using principles so straightforward they almost seemed too simple to work. That detail hit me differently than any financial advice I'd ever encountered. Because I had been consuming financial content for years. YouTube, podcasts, Instagram threads. I knew what a Roth IRA was. I understood index funds. I could explain compound interest at a dinner party. I just couldn't seem to actually save money. Something wasn't connecting. And I was starting to think it wasn't about the information. It was about the philosophy underneath the information. Welcome back to Money Save Tricks, where we talk about money the way it actually works in real American life. Not theoretical. Not aspirational. Real. Today's video is different from anything we've done before on this channel. We're not talking about budgeting apps. We're not talking about cutting lattes or negotiating your cable bill. We're going deeper than that. We're going to talk about 10 Japanese money principles, some of them over a century old, that completely rewired how I think about spending, saving, and what money is actually for. Here's what I want you to understand before we get into it. I didn't change my income. I didn't pick up a side hustle. I didn't move into a smaller apartment or stop going out entirely. I just changed the operating system underneath my financial behavior. In 12 months, my savings went from $840 to just over $19,000. Same job, same salary, same city. Different philosophy. Every principle I'm sharing today is directly applicable to your life right now in 2026, no matter what you earn. Some will feel immediately practical. Others will challenge the way you think about money at a level that goes much deeper than any spreadsheet. Let's get into it. The first principle is called Kakeibo, pronounced Kakeibo, and it's the foundation that everything else in this video builds on. Kakeibo was developed in 1904 by a Japanese journalist named Hani Motoko, who became the first woman to work in professional journalism in Japan at a time when women had almost no financial authority of their own. She designed it as a simple tool, a handwritten household ledger, to help women take control of their family's money using nothing but a notebook and a pen. The structure is elegantly simple. At the start of every month, you write down 4 things by hand. How much money is coming in? How much you owe in fixed expenses? How much you intend to save? And how much you have left to actually spend? Then every single day, you write down every purchase you made and assign it to one of 4 categories. Needs. Wants. Culture, which covers things like books, courses, or meaningful experiences. And unexpected expenses. At the end of the month, you sit with your notebook and answer 3 questions. How much did I actually save? What went well this month? And what would I handle differently? That is the entire system. And yes, it sounds almost too simple. That's exactly why it works. Why writing by hand changes everything. Here's what separates Kakeibo from every budgeting app currently available on your phone. The physical act of writing forces your brain to consciously process every purchase. When you tap your card and a number updates on a screen, your brain barely registers it. The friction is almost zero. The awareness is almost zero. But when you sit down at the end of the day and physically write food delivery, $38, want, something different happens. Your hand is telling your brain something the app never could. That was a choice. You made that purchase. You chose the one over saving that $38. Studies on Kakeibo practitioners suggest the method can reduce unnecessary spending by as much as 35%. My first month, I hit about 22%. On my income at the time, That translated to roughly $1,150 saved in a single month from a $3 notebook. The problem with financial apps. Consider this. According to polling data, nearly half of Americans entered 2026 without any kind of budget at all. Among those who do budget, the majority use apps that automate the categorization process, which means they never develop the conscious spending awareness that Kakeibo is specifically designed to build. The app does the thinking. The brain goes back to sleep. Kakeibo's 4 categories also deserve attention because they explain why the system has survived for more than a century, while budgeting apps cycle through popularity and abandonment every 2 or 3 years. 4 buckets. Needs, wants, culture, unexpected. That's it. The moment you sort a purchase into one of those 4 buckets, you're making a judgment call that no algorithm can make on your behalf. Is this restaurant meal a need or a want? Is that online course genuinely culture? Or is it a want wearing the costume of self-improvement? Did you go to Target for paper towels and come out with $80 of things that simply caught your eye? Those questions create what behavioral researchers call cognitive friction. Friction slows the decision. Slowing the decision creates awareness. Awareness, over time, changes behavior. American financial culture is obsessed with eliminating friction. One-click purchasing. Tap to pay. Auto-renew everything. Frictionless sounds efficient. But frictionless spending is precisely why the average American underestimates their monthly subscription costs by over $130 and their impulse spending by nearly $300. Kakeibo puts the friction back. Deliberately. Because the friction is the point. My friend Dana tried Kakeibo for 6 weeks after years of downloading budgeting apps, setting them up, and abandoning them within a month. She told me the apps made her feel like a passive spectator of her own finances. The data was there. She just never actually processed it. Writing it down by hand forced her to process every single purchase twice. Once when she made it, and once when she recorded it. By week 3, she had developed a new habit. Before reaching for her wallet, she would mentally ask herself, "Do I want to write this down tonight?" If the honest answer was no, she didn't buy it. Her discretionary spending dropped by $400 in the first month. The second principle is called Mottainai, and it has no direct English translation. That absence of translation is itself worth paying attention to, because it suggests we're missing something as a culture. Mottainai is a feeling. It's the emotional discomfort, almost a kind of moral unease, that arises when something useful is thrown away, wasted, or discarded before its value has been fully used. In Japanese culture, wasting a resource, food, fabric, time, money, carries genuine social weight. When someone tosses food that could have been eaten or replaces an appliance that could have been repaired, the cultural response isn't neutral. It's Mottainai. What a waste. What a shame. Contrast that with how American consumer culture actually operates. The USDA estimates that American households throw away roughly 30% of the food they purchase every year. That's approximately $2,100 per household going directly into landfills. The EPA reports that Americans discard around 82 pounds of clothing and textiles per person annually. We replace smartphones on average every 2 to 3 years, despite the fact that most devices are engineered to last 4 or 5. We abandon furniture when we move instead of taking it with us. Waste in America isn't a cultural failure. It's a built-in feature of the economic model. What Mottainai looks like in practice. When I started applying Mottainai to my own life, food was the first place I looked. For 1 week, I photographed everything I threw out of my fridge and pantry. The results were genuinely uncomfortable. Half a bag of salad greens. Leftover pasta I forgot about. Yogurt 2 days past its date. A quarter of a rotisserie chicken. I was discarding roughly $40 worth of groceries every single week. That's more than $2,000 a year coming directly out of my refrigerator. I changed 3 things. I started planning meals around what was already in my fridge before buying anything new. I started freezing leftovers the same day instead of convincing myself I'd eat them tomorrow. And I shifted to buying smaller quantities more frequently instead of bulk purchases that spoiled before I finished them. Within 3 months, my grocery spending dropped by nearly 30%. Not because I was eating less, because I was wasting less. But Mottainai extends beyond food. It changes your relationship with everything you own. You repair instead of replace. You finish something completely before buying the next version. You look for a second use before discarding something entirely. There's a Japanese tradition called kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken ceramics using gold mixed into the adhesive. The repaired piece isn't hidden. The gold lines are displayed. The cracks become part of the object's story, and the repair actually adds to its value rather than diminishing it. Apply that philosophy to your finances. The phone with a small scratch. The jacket with slight wear. The couch that's a few years old. These things still work. They still serve you. Mottainai teaches you to recognize that value instead of defaulting to replacement. The third principle comes from Confucian teaching and has been practiced in Okinawa, Japan for centuries. Okinawa, for context, has one of the highest concentrations of people who live past 100 years old anywhere in the world. The principle is called hara hachibu, which roughly translates to eat until you are 80% full. The practice is simple in concept and surprisingly difficult in American culture. You stop eating when you feel about 80% satisfied, before you hit the point of fullness you're used to. Most of us in the US eat until we're genuinely uncomfortable. We upsize. We pile the plate. We order appetizers and entrees and dessert and feel some kind of obligation to finish everything because we paid for it. But the financial implications of hara hachibu become extraordinary when you translate the principle beyond food into a general philosophy of enough. What 80% means for your money. Applying hara hachibu to your finances means committing to live on roughly 80% of your take-home pay and treating the remaining 20% as untouchable, invisible, already gone, not part of your spending reality. If you bring home $4,200 a month after taxes, you live as though your income is $3,360. The $840 difference moves automatically into savings and investments on the day your paycheck arrives. You never see it. You never miss it. You never budget against it because as far as your spending life is concerned, it doesn't exist. The Bureau of Economic Analysis reported that the U.S. personal savings rate sat at roughly 4% in early 2026. 4%. The Japanese cultural baseline, influenced heavily by practices like hara hachibu, targets around 20%. That 16-point gap sounds abstract until you run the math on a single income. On a $60,000 salary, 4% savings equals $2,400 per year. 20% savings equals $12,000. At 8% average annual returns over 30 years, those two numbers become $293,000 and $1.47 million. Same salary. Same life. The only variable is the percentage you treat as yours to spend. The philosophy beneath the math. In Okinawa, hara hachibu isn't taught as a diet strategy or a savings hack. It's taught as an expression of respect. Respect for food, because you don't waste it through overconsumption. Respect for your body, because you don't burden it unnecessarily. Respect for your future self, because you leave something available for tomorrow instead of consuming everything available today. That word, respect, is largely missing from American financial culture. The average American carries around $6,500 in credit card debt at an interest rate above 22%. That debt is borrowed comfort. It's the financial equivalent of eating until you're 120% full and not understanding why you feel terrible. Hara hachibu applied to money isn't just a savings strategy. It's a form of respect for who you'll be in 10, 20, 30 years. It's telling your future self, I left something for you. I didn't take it all. A woman named Carla, who works in hospital administration in Dallas, started applying this principle to her finances about 18 months ago. She calculated 80% of her take-home pay, roughly $3,600 out of $4,500, and committed to living within that number. The remaining $900 went automatically to a high-yield savings account and a Roth IRA on the first of every month. In 18 months, Carla saved and invested over $16,000. She told me the hardest part wasn't the spending reduction. It was retraining her brain to experience 80% as enough, as abundance, rather than as restriction. Once that mental shift happened, everything else followed without effort. Most people in the US know kaizen from the business world. Toyota made it famous as a manufacturing philosophy. But in everyday Japanese life, kaizen applies to everything, including your personal finances. The core idea: don't try to overhaul your life in one dramatic move. Instead, improve by 1%, repeatedly, over a very long period of time. Applied to money, kaizen looks like this. This month, you reduce your dining out spending by 10%. Not 50, Just 10. Next month, you bump your retirement contribution up by 1%. The month after, you cancel one subscription you forgot you had. Then you negotiate one bill. Then you swap one name brand item for the generic equivalent. Then you automate one more savings transfer. Each individual change feels almost insignificant. Each one requires almost no willpower. But 12 months of kaizen produces a financial life that's fundamentally different from the one you started with. And you barely felt the transition. Why your brain resists big changes. The reason kaizen outperforms dramatic financial overhauls comes down to neuroscience. When you attempt a large, sudden change, slashing your entire discretionary budget, cutting every restaurant meal, eliminating every subscription at once, your brain's threat detection systems activate. Large changes feel dangerous. Your brain resists them. That's why most people who commit to radical budgeting in January abandon it by February. The change triggered resistance. Willpower eventually ran out. The old habits returned. Kaizen operates below that threshold. A 1% improvement doesn't trigger resistance. It doesn't feel like deprivation. It barely registers as a change at all. But it accumulates. Silently. Persistently. Until one day you check your savings rate and realize it's gone from 4% to 19% over the past year. And you genuinely cannot point to a single moment when it became hard. Ikigai is usually presented in the West as a career framework. The intersection of what you love, what you're skilled at, what the world needs, and what you can earn a living doing. But in Japan, ikigai isn't primarily about career. It's about having a reason for being. A purpose that gives structure and meaning to your daily choices. That purpose might be tending a garden, cooking for the people you love, staying healthy into old age so you remain present for your family. It doesn't need to be grand. It just needs to be genuinely yours. When you apply ikigai to your finances, something shifts that no spreadsheet or budgeting tool can replicate, because it answers the question that almost no financial advice ever asks. What is the money actually for? Most Americans either save without a clear purpose or spend without real intention. The saving happens because it's supposed to. The spending happens because something looked appealing. There's no underlying philosophy guiding either behavior. Ikigai gives you that philosophy. And when you have it, every financial decision becomes something different. It becomes a vote for or against the specific life you're trying to build. My friend Terrence defined his ikigai as being financially present for his daughter's childhood. Not wealthy. Not retired early. Just free from money stress during the years his daughter would actually remember. Once he had that clarity, something unexpected happened. He didn't need more willpower to stop impulse spending. He needed less. Because the impulse purchases stopped feeling expensive. They started feeling irrelevant. They weren't obstacles to his financial goals. They were obstacles to the specific life he was choosing. Purpose is more powerful than discipline. Discipline runs out. Purpose doesn't. Wabi-sabi is one of the most significant Japanese philosophical concepts, and it is the direct antidote to the consumer culture that American spending is almost entirely built on. Wabi-sabi is the appreciation of things that are imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. A ceramic bowl that's been repaired. A wooden table carrying the scratches of 30 years of family meals. A sweater with a small mended patch that marks how long you've actually worn it. In America, imperfection is a purchasing trigger. A scratch on your phone screen is a reason to upgrade. A scuff on your shoes is a reason to shop. A couch cushion that's lost some firmness is a reason to browse furniture sites. The entire consumer economy depends on your dissatisfaction with things that still function perfectly well. Wabi-sabi invites you to find genuine satisfaction in those things instead. The math behind this mindset, the financial impact of this shift calculated over time, is significant. Americans spend roughly $9,500 a year across the categories most driven by aesthetic dissatisfaction: clothing, home goods, and personal electronics. If embracing wabi-sabi reduced that spending by just 25%, by helping you keep things longer, choose repair over replacement, and genuinely appreciate what you already own. That's $2,375 per year redirected. At 8% average returns invested over 25 years, that figure compounds to roughly $183,000. Built entirely from the practice of finding value in what's already in front of you. In Japan, osoji is a tradition carried out at the end of each year. Families conduct a thorough, intentional cleaning of their entire home. physically clearing out what no longer serves them and entering the new year with both physical space and mental clarity. It isn't casual tidying. It's a ritual of deliberate release. Applied to your finances, Osoji becomes an annual audit of your entire financial life. Once a year, ideally in December or January, you sit down and review everything. Every subscription, every recurring charge, every insurance policy, every investment allocation, every debt balance, every autopay you set up and forgot about. You cancel what isn't serving you. You renegotiate what can be lowered. You realign everything with who you actually are right now and what you're actually working toward. Most people configure their finances once and never revisit them. Subscriptions accumulate quietly. Insurance premiums drift upward without notice. Investment allocations shift away from your original targets as markets move. An annual Osoji catches all of it before it compounds into real financial damage. In my first financial Osoji, I found $318 per month in charges I had either completely forgotten about or actively stopped using. That's $3,816 per year leaving my account silently while I wasn't watching. Gone. For nothing. One afternoon a year. That's the investment. The return on that afternoon can be several $1,000s. Chokin translates literally to savings in Japanese, but in practice it represents something more specific. A sequencing habit that is the structural opposite of how most Americans manage their money. The principle is this. When money enters your account, a portion leaves immediately into savings or investments. Spending happens with whatever remains. That sounds simple. The implications are enormous. The typical American financial pattern looks like this. Earn, spend throughout the month, hope something is left over to save. In practice, there's almost never anything left over because spending expands to fill whatever is available. This is Parkinson's law applied to money. Just as work expands to fill the time you give it, spending expands to fill the income you leave accessible. Chokin breaks that law structurally. By removing a portion of your income before spending begins, you reduce the available amount that spending can expand into. Your lifestyle contracts naturally to fit the remaining number. You don't need to make 200 small decisions every month about what to cut. One decision, the automation, handles all of them. What Chokin looks like in real American dollars. Let me walk through a specific example because the math makes this undeniable. Suppose Marcus brings home $4,800 per month after taxes. Under the typical American approach, he spends throughout the month and saves whatever remains. In practice, nothing remains. His spending reliably fills his income. His savings rate hovers around 3%, roughly $144 a month. And that's only because his employer's 401k takes a small percentage before the money ever reaches his checking account. Now Marcus implements Chokin. The morning after his paycheck deposits, an automatic transfer moves $960, exactly 20% of his take-home, into a combination of his Roth IRA, a high-yield savings account, and any additional 401k contributions. He never sees that money. It doesn't appear in his checking account balance. His spending reality becomes $3,840. Within about 2 months, he adjusts. Not because it's easy at first, but because when the option to spend $1 doesn't exist, the brain stops expecting it. After 1 year, Marcus has saved and invested $11,520. His previous approach generated roughly $1,728. Over 20 years at 8% average returns, Marcus's Chokin habit produces approximately $570,000. His old approach produces around $100,000. Same salary, same city, same life. The only variable is the order of operations. Japan versus America, a structural difference. Japanese households have practiced this sequencing for generations, and the cultural outcomes are visible in the data. Credit card debt is relatively uncommon in Japan compared to the United States. Most Japanese credit cards are configured by default to auto-pay the full balance monthly. Carrying a revolving balance from month to month is culturally atypical. In the US, nearly half of all credit card holders carry a balance from 1 month to the next. Total American credit card debt crossed $1.28 trillion at the end of 2025. The difference isn't income. Japan's median household income is actually lower than America's. The difference is sequence. Save first. Spend second. That is Chokin, and it is the single most mechanically powerful habit in this entire video. Shinrin-yoku translates to forest bathing. The Japanese practice of spending slow, quiet, attentive time in natural surroundings as a form of mental restoration and stress reduction. It costs nothing. That's the point. The broader principle Shinrin-yoku represents is what I've started calling free living. The intentional choice to build your leisure time, your social life, and your recreation around activities that don't require spending money. In the US, leisure is almost synonymous with consumption. Going out costs money. Relaxing costs money. Socializing costs money. A weekend is a shopping trip. Entertainment is a subscription. The Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates the average American household spends roughly $3,000 annually on entertainment. Japanese culture offers a genuinely different model. Walking, cooking together at home, reading, sitting in a park, visiting a garden, practicing tea at home. The richest experiences of daily life happen without any transaction involved. When I started restructuring my weekends around free activities, parks, cooking with friends at home, borrowing books from the library, long walks with no destination, my entertainment spending dropped by more than 60% in 3 months. I didn't feel deprived. The quality of my weekends actually improved. Because I stopped measuring a good weekend by how much I spent on it and started measuring it by how present I actually was during it. Those are 2 completely different metrics. And they lead to 2 completely different financial lives. The 10th habit is the one that holds all the others together. Hansei is a Japanese practice of sincere, rigorous self-examination. Not self-criticism. Not guilt. Not the performance of regret. A calm, honest review of what you did, what the results were, what went well, and what you'd handle differently. In Japanese schools, Hansei is built into the curriculum. Children practice it regularly. The idea is that reflection isn't something you do when things go wrong. It's something you do because reflection is how improvement happens. Applied to finances, Hansei becomes a monthly review, the closing ritual that completes the Kakeibo loop. Once a month, you sit with your notebook and ask yourself 3 questions without judgment. Did I meet my savings goal? What purchases genuinely added value to my life? And what would I do differently next month? 10 minutes. That's the investment. And it's the most important habit on this list, because it's the mechanism through which all the other habits get better. Mottainai sharpens because you notice where waste crept in. Hara Hachibu gets easier because you see exactly where you overspent. Kaizen gets direction because your monthly review identifies the next 1% improvement. Kakeibo becomes more accurate because you're continuously refining your categories. Without Hansei, these habits are static. With it, they compound. And that word, compound, is exactly where I want to close. Every single habit I've described in this video operates on the same principle that compound interest does. Small, consistent inputs, repeated over time, producing results that are wildly disproportionate to the effort involved. A $3 notebook and 10 minutes a day doesn't sound like a wealth-building strategy. Neither does stopping eating when you're 80% full. Neither does finding beauty in a table with scratches on it. But these small behaviors, stacked on top of each other, practiced week after week, month after month, year after year, produce something that no income level can produce on its own. They produce a relationship with money that is grounded, intentional, and sustainable. The wealthiest people I've studied, and I don't mean the flashiest earners or the highest income households, I mean the people with the deepest financial security and the least financial anxiety, share one trait that has nothing to do with income. They understand how money actually works. Not theoretically. At a gut level. They understand the difference between an asset and a liability. They understand that $1 saved is worth more than $1 earned because it arrives without income tax, without additional labor, without burnout. They understand that financial security isn't built by earning more. It's built by understanding more. That understanding has a name. Financial literacy. And it's the soil in which every single one of these Japanese habits grows. Without it, Kakeibo is just a notebook. Mottainai is just a word. Chokin is just a concept you encountered in a video and forgot about by next Tuesday. With it, these habits become a system. A quiet, methodical, profoundly effective system that builds wealth the same way a Japanese garden develops. Slowly, deliberately, with every element chosen for a reason. Nothing wasted. Nothing rushed. Nothing performed for an outside audience. 2 years ago, I was standing in my living room surrounded by things I didn't need, bought with money I didn't have, watching my credit card balance climb while my savings stayed flat. That version of me didn't need a higher salary. She needed a different philosophy underneath her financial behavior. She needed to learn that wealth isn't built by earning more. It's built by understanding more. The habits followed the understanding. The results followed the habits. These principles are old. Some are over 100 years old. They survived economic collapses, wars, and generations of cultural change, because they aren't built on market conditions or interest rates or income brackets. They're built on something more durable than any of that. Respect for money as a resource. Respect for yourself as the person responsible for that resource. And the quiet daily discipline to protect both. You don't need a bigger paycheck to start. You might already earn enough. You need a notebook, a pen, and the willingness to pay attention to where your money is actually going. That's where it starts. That's where it has always started. If this video gave you something useful, share it with someone whose financial life could use a different operating system. Drop a comment below. Which of these 10 habits are you starting with? I'll see you in the next one.